Welcome, everybody, to DAT Poker Podcast, episode 136. It's the new year. It's January 9th, 2023. I'm your host, A. Schwartz, not alongside Roscoe P. Coltrane. Stepping into his stead this week is producer extraordinaire, Terrence Chan. See, how are you?
Hi, nice to be on your show again. That's all I got. I don't have any buttons. I'm just trying not to fuck up all the things, not press anything wrong. I don't have a sound drop, nothing. Yeah. New year, I'm in a new house, and the office probably sounds terrible because it's actually the laundry room, but we'll see how this goes. But my job is to get this thing onto YouTube and onto the podcasts. That's all I'm doing.
All right. And Daniel Negreanu in Las Vegas. Daniel sweating the hockey as usual. I'm sure you've got some poker tournaments coming up. How's it going down there?
I do, but I was speaking of hockey games, because this is just a thing. It's a combination of two things. I went to the game on Thursday. I brought my buddy E-Dog, Eric Lindgren, and who else? And Eddie Sabat and Bill Edler from back in the day. We had a blast, and I haven't seen him in a while.
Bill Edler's the best.
Yeah, we had a blast. And I don't drink that often, hardly ever. But Eddie was buying me doubles upon doubles. And it's like I'm 48 now. And when I was 24, I drink like I'm still 24, drinking regularly. And I hardly ever drink, so that like Thursday was the game. Friday and Saturday, completely out of commission on my couch. It's a combination of the age thing, but also I feel like in 2023, I need to do a couple things. Number one, I need to drink more often, right? Resolution. And I think I need to spend more time on Twitter and really, keep up to what.
Yeah, those are two productive things that you need to do. Absolutely.
I think, I'm going the other way with New Year's resolution shit. Oh, good. More importantly, so this, everyone knows, I didn't know this until later, but like all the all-in luck that I had, I didn't know until later it was because our Christmas tree was up. Okay. Yeah. It is. Yeah. So what happened was, then it's middle of summer. People are like, no. It's way more like bad luck if you take it down now. So we had to wait. January 2nd, I set an alarm. That boy came down. That Christmas tree is down. So look forward to the Poker Go Cup coming up in a couple days. I'm just going to go all in with whatever. Just be like, let's see. Let's do the freaking Ace 4 suited cat jam thing that they do. All these kids today. Oh, yeah. You gotta have a 5-bet bluffing range, buddy. I'm like, okay, yeah, Ace 4 spades. Here we go, all in.
I feel like you should douse it in gasoline, light it on fire. Like, there's got to be a ceremony of some sort to get rid of this thing. I mean,
we're gonna put it up next year, but it's a beautiful tree. It just, clearly had to be the reason. I mean, well, either that or that other person who put a hex on me. I don't know, but those are gone. 2023, new year.
Have we all been playing with ChatGPT nonstop for like 2 weeks? Or am I the only one that's been doing it?
I think I stopped after like 4 days. Okay. It just got repetitive. I think it's getting better now, but I don't know.
I messed with it just to see, like, and it, like somebody posted this one today where it said like, well, I don't want to get too political, whatever, but like it's clearly, some stuff is okay, some's not, and it's based on like who created the thing. Like it asked like to write 5 paragraphs in the tone of a Vox writer on why cucumbers are racist. And it was like really well done. It's like, this is so in the tone, about the indigenous people who pick the cucumbers, and it's racially insensitive, and we appropriate the cucumber and we make it our own. And it's used in these high fancy, like women use it to put on their eyes to look better. White women, patriarchy, it had it all. It was fucking hilarious.
I think those are actually the best ChatGPTs so far. That was my reminder, reminding me to hit the record button at 7:00 in case I forgot to hit the fucking record button, which is what I was terrified about. So I apologize for that. But my favorite ChatGPT thing is probably those do X in a style of Y things, and that is the thing that it seems to do hilarious. Like I know you love the poker Eminem thing.
Yeah, I posted. I said, wrote a poker tutorial in the tone of Eminem, but it spits it out immediately. It's like,
write something in the style of Donald. Give poker advice in the style of Donald Trump.
Yeah,
I have the best cards. I have the very best cards.
You can't ask it anything about Trump.
Oh yeah, because it says it only goes up to 2000 and whatever. It says it only does.
Won't say anything about him.
Really? I did not know that.
I'll give you an example. I asked ChatGPT. I said, okay, write a 1 page on racism, and I asked it to do it in the tone of Joe Biden, Barack Obama. Then I said, let's try Ben Shapiro, Donald Trump. And I was like, okay, well, and then I said Candace Owens. So it allowed me it did one for the Biden and the Obama, and it would not do the other 3.
Interesting.
It wouldn't do the other 3. It was like, nope. Okay. we're not about that.
It seems to change every day because it seems to be updating constantly because the stuff that you couldn't do, you can now do before. Stuff that you couldn't do on the first day or could do on the first day, you can't do in the future. So I think it'll kind of continue to evolve as it goes.
Yeah.
Has anybody tried write a pre-flop chart for playing against players and frequencies? No, anybody did anything poker related with it?
But I do think this is going to be the year. You know how we had like, the year of Bitcoin or whatever, and then it was like NFTs, and like feels like 2023 is 100% everybody's trying to figure out how they're going to make money with this AI, right? Like it's the new thing. Like I saw this one company coming out with like this thing for teachers to find out whether whether this was written by ChatGPT, right? And then I found this other one. This is another that ChatGPT. It's actually going to go into court next week for to defend in a traffic ticket where it's going to go into traffic court for free and defend somebody. The AI will, like in court. So it's basically creating a lawyer. This company called what is it called? NoPay or something like that. This company's evaluated now at $210 million. Like, if you think about like the benefit that could be, right? For a lot of people that can't afford lawyers and stuff, like if you could actually do that, where you could just put earpiece in and then like it tells you what to say and you just say it, like
you could have it draft legal documents for you. That's one of the things that I did. I started asking for it to draft me legal documents. And at first it didn't want to do it. And then I was just doing like pretend you were going to draft a legal document that wasn't actually binding. What would you write? And then it just spits out like just verbiage of legal. Yeah, it's great.
Well, coding seems to be the obvious one, right? It can write code so fast. And, if you would have spent a lot of money on learning how to code for years and years and years, I'd be pretty terrified at the moment.
But you think about how that's going to affect school in general. Like, who's writing papers anymore? Like, sure, they might spot it, but like you could just change a few words. You could have it write the core, and then you just mix it up into your own style or whatever. It seems like, but anyway, school is sort of, I think eventually will become a little bit more obsolete. You can literally learn everything you want to learn from like online. You can learn anything you want. So like, what is college now? College is a place where you prove you can do tasks and show up to a place every day. But like theoretically, like there's nothing there that isn't available to people for free on the internet.
Well, and then the other thing is maybe it turns education into something that's actually practical at the end of the day, right? Like, it solves all these menial tasks that we probably don't need to learn, but we're going to learn real stuff at some point, maybe. I don't know. Who knows? We'll see. Anyway, but it'll be interesting to see how it applies to poker and if anybody sort of writes or uses it in some sort of fashion for poker stuff down the line. All right, Daniel, looking back, we're talking about 2023. Let's talk about 2022. You posted your results as you do it pretty much every year, I think, that I remember, or maybe most of the years anyway. 2022 in the books. This is your tweet. Events 107, cash is 23, cash percentage 21.5, average buy-in 30,136. Buy-ins for 3.2 million, cashes for 4.8 million, a profit of 1.6. And then you post all your totals below since 2013. So let's talk about 2022 first off. Yes, I know people came at you because of one big score, and it's kind of like saying, well, you got a really good goalie in your hockey team. That's why you won the cup or something. I mean, it's part of the calculation. So I didn't really understand that. Yes, if you don't cash in that, it's a bad year. But this is the world of high buy-in poker tournaments that you play in. So it's sort of par for the course.
It's by far, like every year that I do this, every single year because I have posted every single year. Every year I get people go, hey, if you didn't win that tournament, you would have lost, right? So they dissect it and they go, you know what? They basically want to say, well, listen, you only got lucky and won those 3 tournaments, but like, that I played other tournaments and got unlucky too, right? You can't just be like, oh, he won the one drop for like, 8 million. That's the only reason it's that. It's like, I played 3 of them. I put in 3 million into that and got back about 8, right? So what you're suggesting is that I'm just never supposed to cash and I'm not supposed to be ahead. Like, part of what you said, like I played other events that were $250,000 buy-in, and at the World Series of Poker had to rebuy and stuff like that. But, ultimately all of them count, right? But it's like people's obsession with looking at it and going like, oh man, if it wasn't for this and that and this, only taking away the good, like you said. And then it's just funny how people's mental gymnastics do it. Alan Kessler even did it by accident, but his idea was to show like how much variance there can be, because after the World Series, it looked like I was going to have a losing year. Right? I had my worst World Series and who knows what. I was stuck like 1.3 or something like that. but there were still some tournaments to score in, and I did, and I scored in the super high roller bowl. But like, yeah, if I didn't win that, but maybe I would have won some other ones. Oh yeah, Daniel, this is my favorite. If you didn't get so lucky with pocket threes against pocket aces against Bryn Kenny on level 2 of the tournament, right? I won a pot on level 2 of the tournament where I was never at risk. Like I could never lose all my chips. It was a small pot. Like we have 300K to start, 5K on the flop, 10K on the turn. Then I have quads on the river, right? No other way that was going to play out was I going to lose like a massive pot. Impossible, because I'm not going to get it in. But the point is, people look at that one hand and go, it was all luck because you won that one hand, you hit the river. It's like, but that's what social media is. People armchair quarterback. But I think the vast majority of people really appreciate sort of look behind the curtain to see, what numbers can look like. And for me, there's pride in them. And there's pride in also showing the losing year that I had. I had one break-even year and one losing year. I didn't have my records as dialed in before that, but they were much better from an ROI perspective because the buy-ins were much smaller, right? But I was still putting up, 1 million plus per year.
That's exactly what I was going to ask, because you mentioned detail your average buy-in of 30,000. I was curious how much that's gone up over the years, because almost certainly it's gone up because the average, well, there was that small period where like there were some, $1 million tournaments and a bunch of 250Ks. So it might not be continually progressing up, but it's certainly more than it was in 2013, 2014, years like that. So I'm curious if you have average buy-in stats for that period, and also like the events played over that period, and also your cash percentage, because cash percentage has almost certainly gone up too, because tournaments have trended towards paying larger percentage of the field. I mean, 10 years ago, they were still paying like 10 to 12% of the fields, and now they're up to 15, often 18% of fields. Do you have that? Like, do you have those numbers going back to 2013? Because I would love to actually see charts of your average buy-in over the last 10 years and charts of your average events played over the last 10 years and all that stuff too.
I have all that in a spreadsheet from 2013.
That'd be sweet. You should post it.
But what's interesting is the actual average buy-in, you'd think has gone way up. But in a way, like there's been some outlier years where like when there is a one drop, you're playing one turn that's $1 million buy-in. And there were probably 5 years and before, there were more like 100K buy-in tournaments that really don't fly in Vegas anymore for a couple reasons. In Las Vegas, we lose out on the Canadians who would come and play because they don't come because of taxes. And then we also lose because of that stupid thing years ago, we lose a lot of the Asians, like the Paul Fua crowd. So we end up not being able, like when we had the last couple 100Ks we tried to run, it was like 9 or 10 people. That's not, and it was not a good tournament, So really like the biggest you'll see is our 50Ks. But yeah, I can put that together. I mean, I have it in a spreadsheet. And also cash percentage, I want to say that it isn't pure. It isn't as nice.
Because of reentries. Yeah.
Because what I do is, and also average buy-in. If I play a 10K, right? If I play a 10K and I spend 3 bullets on it, like, rebought twice, I count that as 30,000 as the buy-in for that tournament. I don't count it as 3 10s. Like I don't do it individually. I mean, you could, and it's probably better for a lot of reasons, but really for me, there's nothing I'm looking at in these numbers and going, what do I need to prove? They're just fun stats. So I track what I track. I used to track hourly rate, but I realized that's very, very difficult, long-term to do. But I used to track, I track a lot of stuff. I used to track by game, all the things. But it's a fun exercise. And I saw somebody post, like, I think it was Art Papazan, like, why are people posting, their results? And I think for the vast majority of poker players, you have no reason to at all. But if you are at all in the teaching space, or you do coaching, or you offer masterclass or things like that, transparency in that regard, I don't think it's a bad thing, right? Like if you're charging people to be coached, you're like, all right, well, how did you do? I kind of want to know, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if we could get to a spot where it's an opt-in type thing, where a group of poker players, I don't know, would have to be tournament players, I guess. A group of tournament poker players decided that, okay, a number of us are going to post all our results this year. And I don't know if there's a side bet or, some sort of parameters around it. But, if they're paying tax, I get that a lot of people aren't going to post because, for taxes or whatever reason that they find. But there are, imagine, a lot of people that might, jump in if there's some sort of incentive for them to do so.
But there's really no incentive. Like what incentive could you possibly create, right? You're going to make a bet on it. Like bets that people make, they make bets based on like, all right, mutual events played or whatever the case may be. And they track it that way. But like I said, I really don't see like, I mean, if people want to share their results, great. Like I'm an open book. Like I don't really care. You know, I don't mind. Like it doesn't hurt me in any way. Like I don't have a problem with it. But I do think that someone in my position, when I do that year over year, you get a lot of questions. You know, hey, but did you factor in taxes? Did you factor in travel? And they ask all these questions. And I'm like, well, no, right? These are just like my results start to finish, not including swaps, not including selling little pieces on poker stake or anything like that. It's just literally as a horse. If you were looking at my results year in and year out, you'd see that overall I come out in the black.
So we came through your matches with Doug in 2021, right? I think we talked about, are you a better poker player after those matches? I think you absolutely agreed that you'd learned a lot. Do you think you're a better poker player now? I don't know. Sort of through 2022 that you were since you played Doug. Like, do you feel like you've improved or changed or done some more studying, or what do you think there?
Yeah, I've improved exponentially from that point. For several reasons. Number one, I have 30 years experience playing a variety of styles, right? And by understanding and learning the theory is a lot, or trying to have a deeper grasp of it, the most important aspect of what I was able to do was really deeply understand how humans misapply it, okay? Let me give you one perfect example. This is a perfect example, right? People, they study pre-flop. They're like, all right, we got that down. Now they study flop. Okay, against quarter pot, when I have ace 10 on queen 8-3, that's a check call, right? I need to defend that, right? And it's worth maybe, whatever, 0.06 of a big blind. So it's a plus EV play, right? Is it though? Is it though? Is it though? Two reasons. In a tournament when you have ICM considerations. But more importantly, the reason that an IA, like a solver, can say it is profitable for them to play that is because they are going to play perfectly on the turn in the river. Guess what? You're not. You're not. The turn and river are so much more complex. So a lot of these little spots where people say, oh, it's plus EV to peel here on queen 8-3 with ace 10 out of position against a good player. Just because the computer says it's right, if you cannot adequately defend it on turn and river, which nobody can hit it perfectly, then maybe it's not so right. So ultimately I learned that I don't think they have, I don't think solvers have perfected ICM or have a full grasp of it in terms of how tournaments go. I think they're learning, and a lot of people are going down that rabbit hole, but there's some key considerations that solvers don't take into account. And one is, and some are learning to, it's future state. Do you understand what I mean by future state?
No, explain to me.
So for example, you're in a situation where you're faced with a decision, right? If you win this pot, you're going to be chip leader, okay? With 8 left. How much is that worth going forward?
Sure,
how much is the fact that you're chip leader now, not only the EV of the pot and the call in the hand, right? But the added EV of being in an ICM situation where you have 4 guys who are all folding every hand and you get to just open every hand, right? Okay. So the calculation is far more complex. It's not a vacuum, right? When you start to weigh that, like whether or not something is a call or a fold. So yeah, I think combining the knowledge that I had with sort of a deeper look into what I think where people are imbalanced, right? So understanding what are the baselines and then looking at where I think people are imbalanced, then I just made the game way more complex by adding limping. It's just way harder. It is way more complex. People think, well, limping is what fish do. Not when a professional is limping and doing it well, it's very difficult to play against, especially for the solver kids, because I'll tell you why. Solves become so much more difficult when you have a limp, small blind call, and big blind check. Because now you have 2 ranges in that pot that are infinite, right? You got the big blind that can have 9 deuce off, queen 3 off, every flop, right? So it also makes it bluffing more difficult, right? Because you're dealing with multi-way pots and things like that. It also, when I'm the first limper, it allows me to have range advantage on almost every board. Because guess what? I'm the only one likely limping with aces, kings, ace, king, and these types of hands as well. So because people behind would likely, go ahead and raise with that. So what I've done is essentially tried to throw a wrench into what people study, right? And realize I've got 30 years experience, Limpin is Pimpin. And I know for a fact that none of these guys are really studying that at 100 big blind depth. They don't really understand how to play against it at the same way that they would if I'm open raising, right? So yeah, I'm better now because I went down the rabbit hole of understanding theory, but also the most important thing is understanding how I think every human misapplies what they learn, and they go like this. They're like, oh, no, solver says that's correct. I'm like, okay. You're not seeing the forest through the trees or whatever the case may be. You're not understanding it, just because, like, if I were to teach a total beginner how to play poker, I'm going to give them a very different set of rules, because I know the more complex situations become for them on turn and river, the more difficult it's going to be for them. So I might tell a total beginner, all in or fold. That's it. Just go all in or fold. Easy, right? You get the cards, put it in, fold. The more you make, the more you add complexities to it, the more difficult it is to not only teach, to play against, to learn, but to effectively, execute.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think I'm sure there are tons of high stakes players who would agree with you, even if they wouldn't want to implement the kind of strategy that you're implementing by open limping, because I think what you're essentially doing, correct me if I'm wrong, is you're sacrificing a small amount pre-flop. By open limping, you are sacrificing some small amount pre-flop. You can never steal the blinds if you do that. But you are creating a game tree that hasn't been studied at all by them, because and your hope, it's sort of what you said about check calling ace 10 on the queen high flop. It's it's technically correct to do that if you play perfectly, but what makes it an actual negative EV play probably in the real world is the fact that you will play those future streets wrong, out of position against tough players. Now, it's possible that they make bigger mistakes too on those, but it's ace 10 on a queen high flop is hard. But what you're doing is you're sacrificing a little bit, because you're going to have, because the mistakes that people make on the turn and river are so much more important. They're so much larger than the mistakes that are made pre-flop and on the flop. If it's sort of like if you play the pre-flop perfectly, you play the flop perfectly, you play the turn perfectly, but you make a big mistake on the river, that's much worse than having made a series of small mistakes earlier in the hand, because misplaying the river in no limit hold'em when the pot is large, like that is extremely costly.
Yeah. What else becomes costly? What also becomes costly? So you're right, absolutely, in everything that you said. What also becomes costly in a lot of spots is hands where you have to raise fold. Those add up. If you're opening 2.2, get 3-bet and can't call, right? Like, you're burning a lot of chips. In spots where you could limp some of those hands, limp, call the raise, see a flop in a lot of cases, right, if it's 3-4x, or limp and then it goes re-raise. And
well, the GTO chart should give you like a percentage of hands that is your raise folding range, right? So like if you're opening from whatever the hijack, you should, it's whatever the range is. Like the GTO charts know what percentage of the hands you should be raise folding, because you have a raising range, and then you have a respond to 3-bet range, and some percentage of that it's going to be folding, and some percentage of that is 4-betting, and some percentage of that being calling. So theoretically, if they've studied that stuff, they shouldn't be making that mistake. Like the most like good players shouldn't be making that mistake of raising and folding the 3-bet.
Well, I wasn't saying they would be making the mistake. What I was trying to get to too is that the ICM considerations of what happens to your stack.
Oh,
like
right.
When you open, let's say you're off 32 bigs, and you open for 2.2, like 3 hands in a row. You just lost a significant portion of your stack in a spot that where you would have potentially lost less by limping, right? Now, limping does, like I said, it's much more complex. This isn't something, what's unique about it is this isn't something I would teach beginners how to do, because it's too complex. It's too difficult. Yep. It requires complexities of playing multi-way pots and understanding like how to maneuver in those situations. And I watch some of these guys who are really, really good. And when they're in the blinds in these spots, they have no fucking clue. Like, no offense. Like, I'm not even going to name names, but like, in a 4-way pot, they don't see like, that's a board you're supposed to bet, bro. Like 100%, that's your pot. But they're just like, I don't fucking have anything. And there's 4 people in the pot, right? And this is not something I study. So we'll just move on to the next one. In the meanwhile, I get to see more flops. I get to realize more equity with these hands, right? So for example, use a hand like Queen Jack of Hearts. Queen Jack of Hearts has a lot of equity post flop. But if you open and get 3-bet, often you're going to have to fold this hand out of position, which sucks, right? But if you limp and someone makes a standard raise, you can see the flop. Now, you can get in trouble, right? You can get in trouble, flop a queen, get in all that sort of trouble. But, I'm one that likes to maneuver post flop and feel like I can, avoid the landmines as best as possible.
So would you say you've added the limping in this year? Is 2020?
Yeah, I added limping at the Poker Masters. I thought about it actually just theorizing on my own a month prior. And also, a good friend of mine by the name of Phil Ivey, I remember at the World Series in one of the turbos, he was doing it. And I know that he plays short deck, so that it transfers, because short deck is a game where you do a lot of limping. And I saw him doing it in the no limit a lot. I was like, oh, I really like how that plays. Why don't I see if I can go back to it? Then I started to think about Poker Masters, and I tried it for a couple weeks, and it worked really well. I ran really bad. But then in Super High Roller Bowl, I was like, oh, this is really going to work incredibly well. Deeper stacked, I felt like, because, now like sitting on like 100 and, like 200 bigs, if I'm limping and they're making it 4X, okay, well, we're seeing a flop. And my range is like still wide enough. Like I can still have a whole bunch of hands when I'm doing that,
Yeah. I want to talk about, Adam asked how much of a better poker player are you in the last however many years. You've obviously studied no limit hold'em a lot, tournament no limit hold'em. What about what about games that aren't no limit hold'em tournaments? Because you used to be a guy who would play in the Bobby's room, play the 1,000, 2,000, 2,000, 4,000, play all the mixed stuff. You don't do that anymore. You focus on a lot of high buy-in no limit tournaments. But but the World Series, of course, rolls around every year, and you want to win a World Series bracelet, and there's probably 30, 40 events or more that aren't no limit hold'em. I don't know how many, but a bunch of events that aren't no limit hold'em. How much do you have time to work on those games, and what does study look like, if at all, for anything from PLO to Badoogie?
Well, on that note, February 4th, there's going to be a mixed game series at the Poker Go Studio. Which
you did tweet that out. That's right.
Yeah. So they're going to have a mixed game series, which is be fun. We get to practice. But I will say too, like mixed games in general, like I'm a unique individual in that, like, I understand tournament strategy, and I've also played mixed games for a living, which is different than some of the guys who play mixed games typically, and they play tournaments. They don't see some of the spots that require little low variance lines and things like that. So I feel very confident in my mixed games anyway. It's like riding a bike with that. And the games, for the most part, are not that complex that I need to like go, whoa, I need to totally, fix my strategy in these spots. Like I have a really good feel, but you're right. Like just practicing and playing like this series, I'm really looking forward to it after Poker Go Cup. But it's not something I spend a lot of time. One game that I've spent a little more time on specifically for tournaments, because I really enjoy the game. The game always intuitively made sense for me, is PLO specifically, and especially PLO tournaments. And I have a couple friends who are very, very good at PLO. And there's one in particular who Josh Aryeh. I almost exclusively run hands by him, whenever I'm curious about a spot. And there's a couple other guys I know who are very, very good, like the Ben Lambs, and then of course, who else was the other one? Well, not Jared, he's a little nuts, but you know what I'm saying. Anyway, point is, PLO is a game in a tournament which I find really suits my style, because again, it's a game where limping is a thing, right? And it's a lot of post-flop stuff. Like anytime you can play a game where, pre-flop, you still have you're gonna have 40% equity against, on average, against every hand.
Right.
So it's basically not about hand selection pre-flop. I mean, it matters.
And it's pot limit, so people can't price you out of the pot by just jamming pre-flop. Yeah.
I mean, hand selection matters in PLO, of course, especially as you get shorter stack. But ultimately, you're just priced in. You don't have to fold the 3 bets, which I really like. It's all about maneuvering post-flop, which is, suits me real well.
Yeah, one of the games I played a lot of was Omaha 8 or Better. I played a ton of it online, live, cash games. I was a cash game player primarily. And when I tried to play tournaments, I want to get your guys' opinion on this. Terrence, maybe you haven't played as much as obviously as Daniel, but when I went to play tournaments, the people that were having success at tournaments were playing completely different in Omaha 8 or Better in tournaments, and they wouldn't cash. So it was difficult for me to make that transition originally. But then I think, you open up wider a little bit and that you're used to it. And, it translates. But Daniel, what's your opinion sort of on the difference between Omaha 8 or Better cash in tournaments?
Oh, huge. That was one of my, there was a period where I won, I was crushing every Omaha 8 tournament. And I remember it was back in the day of Steve Badger, if you remember that name. And, he was doing some things where, he was 3-betting hands that looked like trash. And in a cash game, if you're doing this, the ace, king, 9, 5s of the world, right? It's not a good hand, but in tournaments, having the high features and a little bit of low features and position, and, and aggression, that's something that's more prevalent in tournaments where you can actually apply some leverage, against players where in cash, people just play, people they're going to play their hands as normal. So I would say in tournaments, it's I think aggression pays more. Also, because by playing more hands in tournaments, you don't get punished. If you bust, you bust. So what? Most people are going to bust, right? But when you run hot and you're playing aggressive and you're playing a lot of pots, you build a big stack. And now the way ICM works, you can really start to push people around. that are like playing really like waiting for really good hands. And you can start like you open with king, queen, 4-5 with a suit, which isn't a very good hand, and you get played against one hand. You're again, similar to like Parliament Omaha, the hand has equity. Like you're a dog, but you're not dead. You're never dead in that game with too high, too low like that. So, yeah. So
specifically, I think it's aggression to
Yeah.
win the pot, not aggression to win extra bets. I think in limit tournament games, I think
Well,
that's really important.
Multi-way pots too. So, like in a typical cash game, you have like 5-6 people limping. Where in tournaments, that's not as prevalent.
Right, but you play more heads up pots in tournaments, and so I think it's important to win more pots more than win extra bets. So if you're in a situation where you're like a 55-45 equity favorite on the flop, like you're not really hustling to put 5 bets in on the flop like you would in a cash game, because obviously your chips are limited. But the aggression to like just win pots and like you might probably like over bluff the river. I find, I don't know, in most limit tournaments, like like just bluffing probably more than his GTO is probably generally correct.
Well, the ace, I want to go back to the ace king 9-5 hand.
Yeah.
Because like that's the perfect example of the hand where like if you can get that hand heads up in position, you're doing fine. You're doing fine. But if 3 people are in this pot or more, you're just fucking dead. Yeah, you're just so dead. If you put 3 bets in with ace king 9-5 and you get 3 or 4 more way action, that hand's shit. That's why in a cash game, where people are more likely to play hands and stuff, that you're not doing that as much. But in tournaments, people play so much tighter, right? And if they're facing 3 bets cold, they're going to fold some like ace 3, jack 7 type hands and whatnot, where they might not do in a cash game, which makes, your aggression sort of just makes you like sloppy and you're just spewing.
What about limit hold'em, Terrence? Do you have any insight on difference between cash and tournaments and limit hold'em?
Yeah, I mean the like ICM and limit hold'em is like actually like a really big deal when you get close to the bubble. I mean, it's just it's funny because limit hold'em is a game where the like pre-flop equity matters quite a lot normally in cash. So in a situation where you're dominated like ace jack against ace queen, that's like just it's a really bad spot in cash, and that's why you can't play too loose in cash. But once you have like the catbird seat and you're approaching bubble time and you have like just 2x 3x the average stack at your table, you can really put it on the gas pedal, and you're in an absolutely terrible position if you're in a short stack. It's just really gross because these hands that are like it's full, if it's like raised and 3-bet to you in the big blind and you have like a hand that you're actually supposed to play in cash, like you just have to bin that so fast. Like like it's like when you have like cutoff raises button 3-bets and you just have like king jack suited in the small blind, like in like high stakes cash game, I'm 4-betting king jack suited in the small blind like all day long, but it's just like you just go like, oh gross, and then you fold it in the muck because you just those are just like the spots that kill you in tournaments, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're right. So one more aspect that's really important between no limit and limit is like you were pointing out, is that in limit, when the chip leader is opening every hand, you can't deny him equity. All you can do is 3-bet him and he's going to see the flop. Whereas in no limit, if this guy's opening every hand with 7 deuce 8-3 off, you can just move in and you win the pot right there. But as a short stack, let's say you 3-bet the guy with ace king, he's calling, you can't fold because you already put 2 bets in, and then the flop comes 10-9-6. And you're like, oh fuck, like what now, right? You're kind of fucked. So the fact that you can't, win those plots pre-flop, that actually benefits guys who are really good post-flop and in limit, especially on a big stack. And you're like, whatever, you 3-bet me, so what? I have 7-8. That's fine. Flop an 8, you're dead.
All right. You mentioned it earlier, Daniel, the Poker Go tour, the stop coming up, but the 2023 Poker Go tour itself starts this week at the Aria with the Poker Go Cup. They've doubled the free roll at the end of the year for the top 40 players. It went from $500,000 to $1 million free roll. I believe I have that right. And they've added a bunch of stuff. I think you mentioned one, Daniel, with the mixed games. They've added, I believe, 25,000 to that one, and several others. So big things for the Poker Go Tour to take it to the next level, to attract more players, to bring in the people even starting this week at the Aria. Pretty happy with the new the schedule, Daniel.
Yeah, so it's a total of like $1 million free roll for the PGT point race, the championship at the end, and there's also an extra 250,000 total given away to player of the series, right? So there's going to be one for Poker Go Cup. We added a 25K for the mixed game series, a 25K for the PLO. I think people really enjoy those little races within the race. throughout. But we've also done this, like it was 21 players, and now it's 40. So 40 players will qualify. And like last year, you'll qualify with at least 100 big blinds, right? And then whatever points you accumulate, you'll get a chip stack accordingly. So if you end up with like 3,200 points, like Chidwick did, you'll start with a stack of like 320,000. Whereas for me, I had 170 points. I started with 170 or something like that. So there's a little bit of an edge and a leg up there. And there's some changes too to which events count. Typically only 10Ks and above, but some events in the PokerGo studio this year of 5K will count as well if they're part of a series. And what also won't count is the Triton series, which did count last year. So it's basically going to be World Series and PokerGo. So the thing with the Triton series is they're actually just so damn big, and they're overseas. So the whole idea behind the PokerGo tour was supposed to be to reward those people that show up, in the studio. And a lot of some of the guys couldn't even come over from the Triton series. So yeah, it's going to be a lot more localized. But again, at 40 players, like that's in reach. If you play, you play a schedule, the PokerGo, PokerGo Cup, you play the US Poker Open, you play some of these mixed game series, the World Series of Poker 10Ks and above all count, right? The super high roll bowl, different things like that. So a lot of opportunity. And I think when you think about the value you get there, you show up on time, you pay no rake, guys. Listen, I know it's better to pay rake, but if you don't like that, if you don't agree with that, you can show up on time, you pay no rake. So even if you think you're just like small winner in the field, you're getting no rake, and you can order from Javier's, like $50 worth of freaking Mexican food, right? For free. So you're getting $50, you show up on time. Obviously, the only way that they make money is when people rebuy, and everybody does. The series have limited rebuy where there's like 2 only per. So it's not crazy. You can't have people that can't just be going all in every hand, to build stacks and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, like when you think about the added value of $1 million extra to get in that top 40, and if you come in at number 40, that doesn't mean you can't win this thing. Like you have 100 big blinds to start. That's plenty. So I think the whole idea behind that is to expand it so that we get more people, joining us in the studio. And again, it is like the best place to play poker. It's just super nice if you haven't been there.
And you put out a challenge, right? You said you'd bet up to 25,000. Anybody who wanted to take you on the PokerGo Tour leaderboard, I think 25 was the most you'd take without saying no, and you could take more if you wanted to, and a 5K minimum, I believe. Have you got any action? Yeah.
So what I offered, I threw it out on Twitter, was like minimum 5K bet. You can bet whoever you want, any player. And what I put was a must take up to 25. Like some players I don't want to bet 200,000 against or whatever. So let's say you take Stephen Chidwick, right? I'm like, all right, I'll take, but up to 25K. And after I've taken 25K on him, I don't have to take more on him. I do have action with a couple people. One, I have 100K with somebody who bet on themselves, mostly to motivate me, I think.
Wait, what if like 8 different people want to take Chidwick? That means like only the first guy gets action. Okay.
Yeah. So basically, like if I've already taken 25K on Chidwick, I can choose to take more if I want to, but I don't feel obligated to. Like I don't have to. So basically, when you do an open challenge, you can't be like, oh, it's an open challenge, but nah, not that guy. So open to everyone to a limit, right? But having said that, the way the schedule plays out, I don't travel. Like the Stars events don't count. Tritons don't count.
You had some FOMO though last year, right? With the Triton stuff. I think I remember where you were like, I kind of want to go to these things. I do.
Yeah, they're awesome. I just don't like traveling. But yeah, no, they're great schedules. I believe they've already announced they're going to have one early in this season. But my plan is not to travel as of now. My plan is to just play the PokerGo stuff, gear up for the World Series of Poker. I'm looking forward to it. I know like we're recording this on a Monday night and we start on Wednesday. I can't wait to play. Like I've just sort of been jonesing to play. I've been watching a lot of video. I've been messing with a tool too. I don't want to say too much about this. It's a new product, a new tool, a new sort of GTO like toy that I've been messing with that I really, really like. And it's a product that I'm excited for because I think when it goes public, I think they should let you guys try it because it'll blow your mind how awesome it is. It's really, the interface is amazing. And it's like, I don't want to say too much, but I'll tell you when it's ready. It'll be soon.
Can we buy shares in this thing? Go public. Is it going to be listed somewhere?
No.
All right. Let's get to the schedule. We're talking about it. Things evolve over time, and the World Series sometimes is quite good about taking suggestions from the poker community to improve their series, and they seem to have getting better and better every year, minus the food. But let's talk about the 2023 World Series. Danny, you seem to be pretty pumped and think it's sharp.
I do, and I'll tell you what I think. First of all, so what maybe some people don't realize is they do take a lot of feedback. A lot of eyeballs look at these schedules. Like, it's not just me. There's several people who comb through it. I combed through the whole thing to look for any sort of major conflicts. We're like, oh no, you've got the 1500 stud the day after the 10K stud. That doesn't work. But what they did was a really good job of providing stuff for everybody throughout. High rollers throughout the entire thing, separated. You're in the, you're not going to miss, if you're playing the 25K PLO, you're not going to miss the 50K PLO. You're not overly crammed, especially the mixed game stuff. If there's a triple draw on a Monday, you're not going to have another mixed game event till probably Thursday. And they've separated them out really well. And for the most part, which I think, Terrence talked about this, the 1500 becomes before the 10K, which is great. It's sort of a theater. So if you are, for example, a stud aficionado coming from the East Coast, maybe the 1500 stud will be on Monday, and then, the 10K will be on Thursday or Friday. So you can schedule 1 week and you get both of your events there. They did a really good job, like I said, of just breaking it up where, like I said, there's nothing that I look at and go, shit, what am I going to do on this day? And again, but they have different people looking at this for different reasons, right? I'm a mixed game guy. I'm a high stakes buy-in guy. And there are other people who are going to play like the millionaire makers and the mystery bounties and that sort of thing. So they have eyeballs looking at that and making sure that those are put together perfectly. Now, there's always people that are going to be like, yeah, but what about this? It's like, bro, you know how difficult this jigsaw puzzle is to put together? It's very, very difficult. But I think like this year, this really ironed out. And I mean, I looked at it 5-6 times. I don't see anything that looks like people are going to be like, this sucks. And also, because Terrence Chan said so, 8-handed limit hold'em.
That was my Christmas. That was the best Christmas present that I could have got from you, Daniel. So yeah, that was great. You mentioned, I do want to sort of unpack this thing, like with that. There's the idea of a 1500 stud on Monday and then the 10K stud. I would actually even argue that probably if you say did 1500 stud on Monday, you could probably do 10K stud on Wednesday, because that would be the final table of 1500. Most people aren't going to be like, God damn it, I missed the 10K stud because I was busy winning the stud 1500. And also you can buy in on day twos of, can you still buy in on day twos of 10Ks? You can still buy in.
Yes, yeah. That'll be.
So you can still buy in it. So if you did ship the 1500 stud bracelet and it was a Wednesday start, you could still buy it on day 2. So I think actually, like, I know you said there's a lot of moving pieces, but like, let's say if there was like a stud week that was like 1500 stud on Monday, 10K stud on Wednesday, and then the 2500, there's usually like a middle one. I don't know if there specifically is for stud, but I know there is for hold'em, because there's the 1500 limit hold'em, there's a 10K limit hold'em, and there's the 3K 6 max. So if you did those Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you had hold'em week, and then you could have draw week, and then stud week, and Omaha week. I know that's hard because realistically, like you said, there's so many pieces. And Nate Silver brought up an interesting point, which was like, a lot of the mixed game players, they want to play all the different games. They don't want to play just hold'em or just stud or just Omaha. They want to be able to play. They want to be able to jump into like a 10-day period and get to play all the different games. So it's sort of the specialists versus the mixed game. But I think there's certain overlap in some tournaments. Like I think like Omaha 8 or better players tend to be the same players, stud 8 or better players. Like OE is like a thing that goes together. Limit hold'em players kind of sit out on their own island a lot. A lot of the draw players like to play other draw games, so you have triple draw, but you also have the Badoogie, and you also have dealer's choice, which is really draw heavy, because the dealer's choice has things like Dramaha, or no, it doesn't have Dramaha, but it has like Badesi Medusi and stuff like that in it. But there was a lot of thoughts, because I just want to read some of the reactions to your tweet regarding that, because there was a lot of like high stakes players in there. So for example, Yuval Bronstein, who plays everything, says he wanted a Big O that was a $3,000 buy-in ish, and a 1500 short deck no limit hold'em, which I think 1500 short deck is really overdue, because having it at 10K for a game that's emerging is like a price point that's too hard for most people. And he said 1K 5-card PLO. There was Danny Tang.
Oh yeah, I want to take each one of these, because Like this is what everyone does when schedule.
Yeah, everybody has their own.
They have like one game that they like, and they're like, you
Yeah.
should do this tournament. Just like the one that I want for me, right?
Right.
There will be a 1500 short deck, I believe, on the schedule.
There you go.
And it's gonna bomb. It's gonna bomb. Okay. I mean, it's fine. But like,
what does bomb mean? What's the number for bomb?
I mean, for 1500, you typically get 300 plus for these mixed game events. It's going to do less than 200, I think, at $1,500 price point. Part of the reason is this: nobody in the US plays it at all. I love the game, by the way. I'm an absolutely big fan. Me too. I enjoy playing the game. Nobody plays it in the US. It's not being played online. If you look at lobbies on online sites, they're dead at the low stakes. There's nobody playing it, right? The 10K, that didn't even draw that well. You already lose some, like I said, the Asian players who would come over where it's much more popular. But having said that, not a big deal. If you have a 10K, you can have a 1500, right? But then like all these sort of obscure events, people say like, like Big O, PLO 5 card, those are fun games, but like those are in other mixes. You know what I mean? Like they're in other mixes. So the question is like, how much of that do you need? And like, doesn't it count when it's part of like dealer's choice and things like that, right? And again, everyone has an idea of like what they want. A standalone Badoogie, this.
Yeah, standalone Badoogie is the one that's funny because whenever Badoogie shows up in a mixed game, it's like the one people are just generally least interested in. Because people want to play the split pod to Badoogie games for whatever reason. Like they want to play Badoogie and Daisy. Yeah. Yeah, and they'd rather play Deuce to 7 than play Badoogie. Like Badoogie is sort of like the redhead stepchild of the draw games. Like people just play it so straightforwardly and nobody does anything in Badoogie.
I think now at the high stakes, I think people really like Badoogie pot limit. Oh, that game is blood. That is the bloody ass game. There's like, because obviously there's some crazy bluffs you can run,
Yeah.
In those games. And I remember playing it for the first time with Aussie Matt, and I'd never played it before. And I'm sitting there and I got check raised. He check raised me pot, and I have like 7 perfect.
Right.
I'm like shitting bricks. like I don't know, but I call, and he's like bluffing, and like he looked at my hand like, how did I not re-raise? What? Re-raise?
Really? That seems crazy.
Yeah, I'm like re-raise. I was like, fuck, man. I thought I was dead. Like I thought I was bluff catching here, But yeah, so obviously, not my game. But the bottom line is this: like you said, everyone has a schedule that they think is best for them. I genuinely do. I always genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, look at the schedules not from the perspective of like what's best for Dan, but what is best to hit everybody, right? And I look at the schedule. There's all sorts of small buy and gimmicky events. You've got seniors events. You got super seniors events. You got a ladies event. You got mystery bounties. You got plenty of no limit. You got high stakes no limit tournaments. You got mixed game tournaments. You got dealer's choice. We've got some mid stakes tournaments. Like realistically, you could nitpick about, well, why don't we have a 7 max limit hold'em? Like, what I mean, an added, you know what I'm saying? Like you can nitpick till you're blue in the face, and everyone's going to have their preferences. But overall, man, you'd be hard pressed to sell me on you're a poker player and there's not the World Series schedule doesn't have anything for you. I don't buy it.
All right. Quickly back with Poker Go stuff. Jason Kuhn is your high stakes dual season 3 champion. Nobody stepped up. He beat Phil Hellmuth. We talked about it. Anybody had 30 days to jump up and challenge him for 1.6 million a man. Surprisingly, nobody did that. I don't know if it was close or if anybody thought about it, but so he ends up as the champion. Do we like this format? Do the pros like this, Daniel? Is it think it's going to continue to?
Here's the thing. This format was supposed to have so many more events, right? But with Phil winning, like it's on Phil's schedule. And, sometimes it would, instead of it being like every 2-3 months, it's like 6, there was like a 6-month period in between or whatever. I think pros like it a little bit. I think the reason that he didn't get challenged, by the way, because 2 people showed interest, but I don't think they understood the rules that well. Like you can't just go play, win the 1.6 and walk. You have to win 2 matches in a row, then you can walk. So like Jason too, like he was forced to play, right? I think the format's kind of good. I think if we have it more regularly, on a schedule, something like that, people can look forward to it. It's kind of fun. I never thought it would get up to 1.6. I really didn't think it would get that big. I figured, people win 2 matches in a row early, they jump ship, but no, I think it's fun. I think people enjoy it. I think, I obviously played it 3 times and it was like the most,
would you want it to be deeper or like 2 out of 3?
I'd like it to,
I know it's for TV, so it's hard to make it like 2 go on too long, but
best of 3 or deeper. I would like it probably just for the sake of understanding like time is an issue. I would prefer it if it started a little less deep but stayed deep longer.
Right.
You know
So
what I mean?
yeah. So
Right.
so
So basically, instead of starting with like 300 big blinds, you start with like 100, but it
slower
stays there.
increases.
Like
Yeah.
it stays at 100 for like, let's say, for example, instead of like 20, 30-minute levels, instead of like, so yeah, then it would just be like, 4 hours of 100 big blinds deep and just play it like that. And then the blinds go up,
Right.
The matches took like 6, 7, 8 hours in that neighborhood, but the type of poker changes, right? Where it becomes once the average stack gets like 35 bigs each, it's pretty, gets pretty crapshooty, and stuff like that. So
It's probably part of the
whatever,
reason
got
people
it.
didn't want to play for 1.6 million is that you
Yeah.
know you're going to be in a 20 big
Well,
blind
that's
crap.
what Jason said. Jason said he didn't think anyone would challenge him. I know that Limitless was considering it. Jungle Man inquired about it. But then you realize, like, okay, I'm going to put up 1.6 million on like a crapshooty thing against a good player where even if I think I'm better than him, like, what am I better? Like 2%? Is this like the best investment I can make? And then I don't even get to keep the money. Then I've played for 3.2 million against maybe a monster who's like even, super good. So yeah, but it's good. I think, it got to 1.6. I think, like, here's the thing. I think if it was Phil at 1.6, he would have been challenged, right? Like people would have definitely challenged him at 1.6, and I would have been one of them.
Nobody thinks they have a 20% edge on Jason Kuhn.
No, of course. Well, exactly, which is crazy, but it's fun. I think I like innovation. I like different things. I like the trash talk aspect of it, like the back and forth. I think it can be something, but again, it needs to be more like, not like UFC, I wouldn't say, but that actually wouldn't be a bad idea is if you had like a main card and an undercard, where you had like a Saturday, Saturday night feuds, and then like people have records. There's stuff you could do around it because I think heads up poker can be kind of interesting. It's different. It's and it's good. Like when you have like a poker network, you have to give people a little bit of everything. Which I know a lot of people are disappointed. The mixed game isn't going to be televised, or it's not going to be.
People would watch like a Robbie versus Garrett game, and
oh yeah.
Like, how many people would watch that, right? Like
a lot. I would tune in. That'd be fun to see.
It would be fun to see. All right, moving on. We had a question sent to me on Twitter by Nikolai, a listener to the show, and I thought it was an interesting question, so I'm going to throw it at you guys. Is there theoretically some imbalance value for a piece seller only providing payouts for the first bullet of a rebuy tourney? Someone being staked, even in part, for the first bullet has now gotten to see what the field looks like. If they never bust, then there's no issue. I imagine you all get where I'm going with this, but as an example, someone could buy in, realize the field is super tough, and then decide to cut their losses after busting. Conversely, someone could realize that the field is soft, realize they're plus EV in the tourney or simply more EV than originally expected, and thus decide to buy back in on their own dollar, now having seen their advantage. What do you guys think? Is that something?
Yes, the person driving to the casino will have an informational advantage. Point, however, is that you're still allowed to drive to a casino, see what the field looks like, and then decide whether or not to buy in. So, I mean,
theoretically, you have more insight if you played hands against these people than if you're watching.
Sure, I guess, but you're not going to. Yeah, I mean, you usually don't get redrawn to the same table. But the thing is, when you're buying a piece of somebody on a staking site, like you're almost certainly taking the worst of it because this person is like the person who's taking the stake. I mean, unless you're like a Daniel and you're selling at par, right? Like for the most part, like the people who are selling, like they're incorporating their time and their skill advantage into that markup. When you're doing that, because nobody's just giving away their labor for free just for fun. I mean, some content creators maybe blah blah. Daniel does it, but it's part of like brand imaging and building and stuff like that. But for the most part, like most people who are out there grinding it out, if they're like selling at 1.3, they're mostly not worth 1.3. And so, yeah, this is just another manifestation of that. But yes, you can still just drive to a casino and see what the field looks like and then decide to buy in. So I don't really see that it's that. I don't know. Daniel, I don't know if you feel differently.
I mean, it's one of those non-issues for me at all. It's like, listen, when you're buying a piece of somebody, you're putting some element of trust in that person. And if you don't have any trust for this person or how they'll proceed or, what they'll do, then don't buy a piece. Like, you know what I mean? Like pretty much it's like free market. Like if you think this person would do that or would be shady or, is going to buy into a tournament and then swap 300% of themselves and then bust on purpose, well, maybe don't, take pieces of those people and whatnot. But I don't think that's a prevalent issue in any way, shape or form. I've never heard this come up before. That was a first for me.
What's this about you versus 99 AI bots and how you would perform? What was the discussion around that?
99 left balloons.
Yeah, so this is another place where you could say, or some may say, that I stuck my foot in my mouth. But I'm pretty confident in this, and I'm willing to do this. And I have some people that are working on creating it. Essentially, what I said was, I believe that if you created a field, a tournament field of 99 bots who play perfect GTO, right? In a regular tournament format, pays 15 spots, average stack is 50 to 60 big blinds throughout until the final table. That they never adjust to what I'm doing, right? They can't, because that would be varying from GTO strategy. They all have to play balance. That means they have to bluff in the right spots. They have to bluff catch in the right spots. They have to call my 3-bets. They have to 4-bet me in all those same spots. I believe that I would have the most EV in that field. Now, the question is, do I think that's true if they just played regular GTO without ICM, or when we talking ICM? And I don't know, I'll ask you, like, if your first thoughts. If that's
my first thought on this is that there is not a bot that exists. Like, so if you're limping into the pot and you're just limping in and out, first of all, there's no bot that exists that plays 9-handed, 8-handed, even 6-handed, no limit hold'em at quote unquote GTO, because that game hasn't been solved, right? Like we haven't close to the, we might have the computational power to do it, but to my knowledge, nobody's actually created solves for this game. Like what we have are sort of like pre-flop approximations that are iterative, that are cloud-based, and that are converging upon the correct solution. And then after that, you take sort of range versus range and have each other play on the flop. So the way that you would break the bot by limping in, I think it might work just because I think nobody's put in the work. Nobody's actually like put in the effort to deal with like, okay, what's a strategy that involves limping? Because that strategy is not part of the solution that's been created. So it's possible.
It goes even deeper than that, I think, too, because for example, if I believe this, if they were not ICM conscious at all, I would destroy them, because they're going to be going for it, right? So like imagine on bubbles, like I would correctly be folding hands and they're just bombing it. You know what I mean? Like two chip leaders, you just get it in because they're not conscious of that. So against that, I actually think it would be quite easy against balanced rangers. And there's actually 3 specific things I said, and everyone mocked me, like Timex and everybody. 3 specific things I said you could do. Like number 1, like you said, I could limp with hands that want to see a flop, like 7-8 suited. And then I can just 3x with aces, kings, queens, right? Be completely imbalanced, but it won't matter, right? Because all my opens, they're going to play them normally, So that means I get to see my flops cheaper with this. Then, in addition to that, on rivers, if I'm going to get called at the correct GTO frequency, on rivers, I can make lots of overbets, right? And in these overbets, if I get paid on some of them, I'm just going to continue to build stacks. The last thing I would do is, if these GTO bots, for the most part, in almost all situations, if their overbetting is balanced, then essentially calling or folding is pretty indifferent, right? Like almost by definition, like whether, and I know there are spots where that's not true, but almost indifferent. So if they overbet and you just fold every time, right? Like you're playing ICM conscience, where I'm stack protecting, I'm doing stack preservation the entire time. So I'm not losing a lot of big pots. Now, so where's the downside? Where do they have an edge? They have a big edge pre-flop and they have a big edge on the flop. If this was created for cash games, I'd be dead. I'd be the biggest loser by a mile. I have no chance, would absolutely get slaughtered. But when you factor in ICM, it becomes a lot more complex and a lot more difficult. So the question is, if you created these bots to be ICM aware, right? But they're still trying to be balanced in GTO, would I have an edge there? And I think so. I do. So I got a couple of people who are inquiring about it. And they want to create this. They're going to try to create it for me and see, because they can create. But there's other things the sort of the question devolved into that, because the original question, it came from Landon Tice and Berkey. They were talking about whether or not, for example, in like these big flare fields, like would a GTO bot be the biggest winner, right? So let's say, for example, Terrence's in this field, and Terrence knows that Uncle Bob never bluffs, right? And Jenny, she's full of it, or whatever. So you're making exploits based on that, but the GTO bot wouldn't. The question are the best human players, would they fare better in these fields? And I think the answer is emphatically yes, unless you're talking about high stakes fields. Like
that's a separate discussion. I think the issue more is just that there's no I mean, Berkey and Landon would know way more about this than me, so I'm kind of talking about my ass. But there's no that I'm aware of 9-handed solves. So I think it's sort of an irrelevant question because who's
No, but you're not saying no. In this example, I'm saying like, for example, let's say me, one bot, and 6 players.
Right.
So
Well,
like,
can the bot out earn you?
If there's only one bot playing,
Yeah,
playing. They have that already.
Well, but what the bot doesn't have is I don't know that the bot has solutions for like, okay, under the gun open limps and 2 under the gun raises to 5x, and then the cutoff cold calls and the small blind cold calls, and then like under the gun cold calls.
That's where the human's edge comes, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't think there's any bot that performs well in these sort of situations.
Well, how about a sit and go? What would you do? Like, how about that? So, for example, you played, like those sit and goes where it's 10 players and top 3 get paid.
Yeah, I think it's probably still the same thing. I mean, I think most of the stuff is still like the computers are always going to have the edge when it's like, the computers are going to smash you heads up and smash everybody in the world heads up, and probably 3-handed too. I think as you start growing it out to create more multi-way, then the bots are going to have a harder time, but probably not for long. Probably in like 3-4 years, they'll be fine. And as to that, so I wanted to, but to get to the argument of, like, will you make more if you are exploiting, never bluffs Bob, right? Obviously, yes, because you just fold when Bob bets. The problem is that when Bob sits down at your table, you don't know that he's never bluffed Bob, or whether he's full of it Bob, or whether he's kind of okay, but probably like over bluffs like a little bit when flush draws hit, or like this is the kind of stuff that I think I have a problem with when we talk about exploitive versus game theoretical play. And that, there's the assumption, and, Daniel, you've been doing this a very long time. You're very good at reading people once they've sat down, but there's this assumption that poker players are really that simple. And they're not always, even though, you can read people cold sometimes. You do have to learn about them for a while. And sometimes there's just not enough of a sample. When you're sitting down in the World Series main event, like 6 guys you've never seen before, like the board runs out 6, 7, 8, 9, right? Like, do you know that this is a guy who over bluffs straight boards? Do you think this is a guy who under bluffs straight boards? Like, you've never met this guy. You have to make a decision right there, and you could get it wrong. And that's why you need sort of like a GTO foundation to be like, okay, this is a threshold hand. This is what the solver says I should call, but I'm gonna lean it a little bit this way, or I'm gonna lean it a little bit this way, but depending on what I think of this guy or this gal.
No, totally get what you're saying, but I will say that there is a lot more information available that sort of you can box people, right? You can put people in buckets where you see a guy sit down, and there are stereotypes and certain specific things you'll see from somebody that will lead you to believe, and then obviously you combine that with watching them play for an hour or so, and you start to pick up some ideas. So you see them in one spot, for example, not bet a river after check 2, right? So you see one spot where they do that, and a spot where it's like a clear bet. That one spot most likely tells you so much about how they think about the game, right?
Agreed.
So you don't need a ton of examples. You don't need an example for every single one. But like, if this fucking guy who checked back like top 2 now raises you on the river, I mean, sure, he may be like leveling the fuck out of you all, but probably not. And the thing is that obviously, a bot won't do that. A bot will just play it straight, which is probably the ideal way to start one. But ultimately, like in these fields, when you have such a diverse crew, like when you have like the win or the main event, when you have like 3,000 of people, like I just don't think that, like, I think, for example, I think that the GTO bot's going to just end up doing 2 things that destroy them, which is 1, make way too many light calls, right? I'm just going to supposed to call, and then make too many like really ambitious bluffs that are correct, right? Except they're not against, these types of people. So they'll make egregious, massive punts. So for all their edge that they have, like pre-flop and flop, as the pots are bloated and the mistakes become bigger, that's where I feel like I can overcome what it has on me pre-flop and on flop is on rivers, where it's going to make huge mistakes, not in theory, but like in practice against specific players that I won't.
All right. Looks like we've run a bit over an hour. We'll end it there. Thanks to you guys for getting together. We'll be back with Roscoe next time. Thanks to everybody out there for listening, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye.
Peace out, gents.
See you guys. Good luck.
Record, right?
I'll send this over to Ross somehow.
You press record, right?
I did. I just gotta make sure I save it, or what do I do to save it? I think I just stop. I hope I just hit stop.
Oh, no. Don't just fucking hammer buttons without knowing.
I don't know. Like, I think you just hit stop, but there's no save button. It says, I'll Google it. I'll Google it.
See you guys.
Oh.